Hello, and welcome to another episode of Love Is. I am your host, Stacey Herrera. Today, we're talking about something that's still surprisingly taboo, even though it's literally how most of us got here. Yep, we're talking about sex. So we're not going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about talking about it. Because can I tell you something? People are still so reluctant to talk about sex, even though life is sexually transmitted. By and large, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, life is still sexually transmitted. I know some of y'all have already tensed up, and maybe you're checking to make sure that no one can hear this through your earbuds. But that reaction, that's exactly why we need to have this conversation. Sex is something that most adults do think about, want, or desire. Yet so many of us struggle to have honest conversations about it. We'll reference that old song from 1928 about how every creature on earth does it. Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. But anyways, we still are struggling to talk about what we need, how we like it, what we don't want, what we do want, And there are people who talk around it. They brag about it, they boast, they insinuate or allude, but talking in circles, it's just that, circles. Boasting braggarts are often just as shy as those who avoid the subject entirely. But we should be talking about sex often. We should be talking about sex all the time. And I'm not just talking about having the safer sex conversation, which is both necessary and extremely important, but that's an episode for another time. But we need to be talking about what we need, how we like it, when and how we want it. And I probably have already lost some of y'all, haven't I? I can feel you squirming. So let's begin by talking about why talking about sex feels so challenging and uncomfortable. For some of us, it's our cultural or religious backgrounds. If you were raised in an environment where sex was seen as private or taboo, it's going to be hard to talk about. For others, it's fear of judgment. Society is a really harsh critic, and none of us want to be judged for what we like, what we've done, or how much or how little experience we have. And sometimes it's simply about being undereducated. When sex education is missing or incomplete, we have no idea what's quote unquote normal or even how to start a conversation about it. Then there's the embarrassment. Talking about sex can make us feel exposed, especially if we have uncomfortable or uneasy feelings about our bodies, about our desires, about our sexual history. We also worry about offending our partners, especially if we come from different backgrounds or if we perceive our values as different. Talking about sex can lead to conflict, especially if there's unaddressed dissatisfaction or a perceived incompatibility of desire. Some of us mistakenly think we've been together long enough, they should know what I want. Or worse, if we're together, I can do whatever I want. Cringe. Some of us avoid talking about sex because it's a way to avoid rejection, which leads me to insecurity. Doubts about performance and desirability, they keep us tongue-tied. So now we're going to move on to the practical advice section because if you're brave enough, and I hope you are, I've got 10 tips for talking about sex that'll make it easier. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be uncomfortable, but it'll make it easier. Number 1, start with you. You can't talk about sex with someone else if you can't talk about it with yourself first. You need to get clear about what you want, what you need, your boundaries, your desires. Getting to know these things about yourself is like talking to a friend. So explore, get curious so that you know these things about yourself, which will make it easier for you to share it with someone else. Number 2, location and timing. This part is important. Do not, do not have a conversation about sex while you're watching TV. Don't do it while you are in the bed. That's so, so important. These conversations deserve your undivided attention, but it also needs to be in a neutral setting where you both can feel relaxed and where there isn't also the assumption that something is about to happen. So, at the risk of repeating myself, I implore you, do not talk about sex in the bedroom. It is simply not the move. Let it be in a neutral space so that it's not sexually charged. Because talking about sex and doing sex are two different things. You want to get comfortable just talking about sex like you would talk about anything else. Okay? Number 3, build gradually. Think Eiffel Tower. Begin with the lighter topics to establish a flow before you slide into really juicy stuff. It's a conversation, not a blowjob. So I want you to start at the base, not the tip. Number 4, make it a dialogue, not a monologue. Conversations are supposed to be reciprocal, like a sexy tennis match. So don't hog the ball, pass it back and forth. Be an active listener and show that you are interested. This is important. Like, interesting and interested are two different things. People need to know that you're interested in what they're saying. You want your partner to offer that to you, and you also want to offer that to them. So you want to show genuine interest in their thoughts and feelings, just like you want them to do for you. Number 5, embrace the awkwardness. Conversations about sex are like dancing. You might step on a few toes before finding your rhythm, and that's okay. A little humor can diffuse the uncomfortable parts, but don't use humor to deflect. Like, that's a really important thing. Sometimes we can hide in humor, so use it sparingly, just to lighten the mood, but don't use it to hide. Number 6, use I statements. I know that sounds like therapy speak, but it works. So instead of using phrases like you never, try something like I feel like. Because you don't want to point fingers, you just want to express yourself and be open. Number 7, stay present. This is not the time to mentally check out or daydream. You want to maintain eye contact. You want to stay in the room. You want to show that you are both invested and interested. Number 8, create safety. You want to feel safe during this conversation, but you also want the other person to feel safe too. So abide by the golden rule. Treat them how you want to be treated. You may have different preferences. You may have different limits. You may have different desires. What feels good to you might feel different for them. All of that's okay. Consent and respect are incredibly sexy. So make sure that you are asking and talking about consent and making sure that you're having these conversations in a respectful way. Number 9, be honest but kind. Honesty will always be the best policy, but a little sugar helps the medicine go down. So when you're talking about what you want, it doesn't have to sound like a laundry list of complaints. In a nutshell, use your words, but also use your heart. Number 10, keep the conversation going. Talking about sex is not a one and done deal. Your sexual landscape will change just like your taste in Netflix series. It changes over time. So regular check-ins will help you stay in the same sexy zip code with your partner. Now, everything that I just said is like really high level. These are just like foundational steps. And it might feel a little bit daunting. It's only at first. Like I always say, practice makes better. And this sounds cliche, but it's true. Communication really is the key when it comes to relationships and a good roll in the hay. Talking about sex is healthy. It's normal. It's necessary. And the more we normalize these kinds of conversations, the more fulfilling and intimate our lives and our sexual experiences can be. Because love is having the courage to talk openly about what brings you pleasure and honoring your partner's voice when they do the same. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or forward it to a friend who needs to hear this. And if there is something that you want me to talk about in future episodes, I invite you to leave a suggestion in our suggestion box. You can do that at staceyherrera.com/suggestions. Everything is welcome here. I love you.